One of the things early on that I was fascinated by was the weekly world news newspaper and these sort of tabloid newspapers which were printed and available really in the supermarket. And they had these kind of crazy stories in them about aliens or these kinds of things, you know. And they were always accompanied by retouched photos and things like that, which were then reproduced in this kind of low quality, grainy newsprint production, which was available in the 60s and 70s and so forth. You know, the way UFO photography works, really it's a kind of very vernacular process where people kind of copied and traded images around a lot. You know, the idea of a primary work or original didn't really kind of matter to the practitioners such as George Adamski, who began in the mid-50s.
C'est souvent des images qui ont une qualité visuelle assez pauvre, et pourtant elles ont eu énormément d'influence. Donc Oursler a amassé suffisamment d'images d'OVNI pour qu'on puisse parler d'un genre pictural existant. Et c'est peut-être quelque chose qu'il veut partager ici dans cette installation, c'est de commencer un petit peu à réfléchir à ce genre et de proposer aux visiteurs de décrypter un peu la construction des images d'OVNI, mais aussi de décrypter les films de science-fiction auxquels il est habitué.
One can look at science fiction and UFO photography and the phenomenon surrounding it as a kind of response to fear of the unknown. You know, space is always represented this window into the eye in the sky or the kind of divine or the existential void. And when Sputnik revolved around the Earth in 1957, it was the first satellite which was able to stay in orbit around the Earth, and it really changed people's perspective of the heavens. It became occupied by this kind of cold, evil eye of communism. The Cold War was a big part of the history of UFOs and science fiction and so forth.
Entre les années 50 et les années 2020, il y a un changement de la perception de l'extraterrestre. Dans les années 50, on est sur un discours qui est beaucoup plus bienveillant, alors qu'avec le temps, en fait, on commence à avoir peur des extraterrestres.
I'm not really sure where that comes from. You know, that's kind of part of that exhibition in a way, is to kind of chart that, you know, like where did we... Which path led us to that?
On a invité Tony Oursler à présenter un projet à Photo Elysée parce que c'est quelqu'un qui est aussi en mesure de présenter une archive photo. Et c'est une partie de son travail qui m'intéressait moi personnellement, c'était de voir comment on peut présenter une archive photo de manière complètement différente de ce que ferait un musée.
The archive of UFO photos, they're largely digital reproductions which appear on the series of screens across the wall. But the idea was to kind of animate them a little bit rather than fetishize the photographic objects so much, to kind of put them on digital screens of varying sizes, which kind of echoes the way that they're originally collected. So the message in our exhibition, you know, is always one of creativity for me, because I'm interested in activating the viewer to kind of, whether it's belief, disbelief, but also to just see the kind of beauty of human imagination that's implicit within these images. And it's not so much about whether there's hoaxes or truth, but also just a kind of monument to this imagination.